Welcome back to Off Ball Takes. This is your host, Yarby Laws, and
Christopher Wells.
this might end up being a longer episode, so we hope you guys enjoy this one. And once again, we see all the support you guys are giving, all the views, all that stuff. So keep it up, and we'll keep producing content.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. So to kick this one off, we got the All Star returns. That's the first thing we're going to cover is the All Star returns. So the official All Stars have been revealed. And in the Eastern Conference, we have Giannis, KD, Jason Tatum, Donovan Mitchell, Kyrie Irving. And then in the West, we have LeBron, Jokic, Zion, Steph, and Luka. And if you recall, we actually did an episode on this where we picked our own all stars and starters and reserves. Um, and I got the West completely right. So I had Steph, Luka, LeBron, Zion, Jokic. So that was pretty accurate.
Yeah, and I got the East. I had Kyrie, Donovan Mitchell, Durant, Giannis, and Tatum.
Yeah. So I mean, we missed on the opposite sides that obviously we didn't get right, but
Yeah, I mean the starters were pretty much what we thought. I mean, Joel Embiid. We know that there's a lot of people that feel like that. People got snubbed. Joel Embiid, Sabonis, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. But you kind of also have to remember the All Star game is kind of like a popularity contest where
yeah,
you know players with big fan bases and big markets. Those are the guys that are usually going to get in as the starters. But at the same time, like I don't have a problem with any of these, because for example, like in the West, I had AD over Zion, but I completely see why Zion would be there, and it makes sense. His team has been really good, although as of late they've been sliding because he hasn't played.
mm-hmm.
And I mean even for the games played, I mean they played almost the same amount of games. But again, I think that the Zion pick makes a lot of sense. The team, you got to reward the team for playing really well.
Yeah,
Um, and then in the East, same thing. I mean, I think you had picked Darius Garland
yeah,
right over Kyrie. Yeah, and like
mm-hmm.
Cleveland's still really good. And I mean, again, all these people are still going to be all stars. It's just a matter of whether or not they start or not.
Yeah, exactly. But I could understand the outrage for Sabonis and stuff like that because when I was on Instagram earlier, I did see like in the returns posts or whatever, people were saying Shea got robbed, Sabonis got completely robbed. So I understand it, and like you just said with the injuries thing, Zion didn't really play,
Right.
and his team's been doing very well as you said, but
Mhm.
I could definitely understand Sabonis being a starter. So if there were any change that I would make, like as of today, it would definitely be Sabonis over Zion.
Yeah. And, even like between, Shea and Steph or like John Steph, I mean, like, again, it's like what we mentioned, it's also just a popularity contest. Cause I mean, like, say for Shea, he's been having a great season too, as his job. But I mean, Steph is also Steph, and he's had a
Mm-hmm.
great season too. And I mean, he hasn't played in as many games as those guys. And I think that's where some people, would differentiate. Cause say with Shea, he's played more games and stuff, and his team isn't that much worse than Golden State. But
Yeah.
again, like, these are the people that people want to see in the all-star starters. And I mean, like, again, these guys are really good. And it shows how stacked the league is too. Like when you're
Yeah.
talking about guys like Joel Embiid coming off the bench for the all-stars as good as he is, I mean, that's kind of speaks volumes about all the talent in the league.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, it's also pretty telling because we got to think of the NBA as a business because that's what it is at the end of the day. And Curry is a brand name. He's going to bring in more, everything, revenue, following, views, etc. So
Yeah.
it's the NBA is going to pick Curry over Shea every time.
And say even like AD over Zion, but then the issue that you may have there is you probably would have some people that may have an issue with the Lakers having two All-Star starters, even though they're like 13th in the Western Conference.
Yeah.
So I can see stuff there, but overall, I think the list makes a lot of sense. And again, it's not that far off from what we picked. We
Statistically,
both, yeah,
go ahead.
yeah. I mean, neither of us had Joel Embiid in the starting
Yeah,
five,
heck
but
no.
yeah, even though again we recognize he had a great season, but
Yeah.
again, the picks are the picks.
Yeah, statistically, it's not the most accurate, but popularity wise, yeah, it's they got it.
Yeah, yeah. It'll be interesting to see once they fill out the reserves. Um, And again, you can check back in one of our previous episodes to see our all-star picks.
Yeah.
But, so far, I think I'm pretty pleased with this list.
Yeah, me
About what
too.
I thought.
Yeah.
All right.
So moving on, there's a big trade that went down. What was it, a couple days ago?
Mhm.
So it was Rui Hachimura. He was officially moved to the Lakers for Kendrick Nunn, a 2023 second round pick, a second round pick swap in 2028. The Wizards get the lesser pick, obviously, and then a second round pick in 2029. Now I'm going to go on a little bit of a rant because I'm a Wizards fan. So, and a lot of us are not happy. In my opinion, this is a laughable and underwhelming trade. And Tommy Shepard, which is our current GM, he looks like a complete Ernie Grunfeld Jr. And it's so strikingly similar to the Kelly Oubre trade for Trevor Ariza. Like, you don't give up a young player for somebody who's, statistically worse, in my opinion. But basically, a little history on the Wizards. Like I said, our current GM, Tommy Shepard, he was a disciple of Ernie Grunfeld, who was the previous Wizards GM. And he set the franchise back like quite a few years. Like, we're digging out of a hole right now. And like I said, terrible trade in my opinion. Kendrick Nunn isn't terrible. I was a fan of him his rookie year. But he had a second year slump kind of, and that I think really forced the trade or whatever. And with Rui, like, he's clearly the better player. Everyone knows Rui's better than Kendrick Nunn. Like, you can't argue logically that Kendrick Nunn is better than Rui Hachimura. Like, Rui's impact off the bench was great offensively. Rui had his moments on defense when he kind of looked like a statue. But I don't know, man. I just cannot fathom how you can trade Hachimura for Kendrick Nunn and a bag of Jolly Ranchers.
Maybe
But
the Wizards don't know that Kendrick Nunn is not as good as Rui Hachimura.
yeah, there's got to be something going on. But, and regarding the picks, like, you got to look at the history of the Wizards second rounders. Like, we took Admiral Schofield. I have no problem with Admiral Schofield. I liked him here, but we could have gotten Bol. We took Schofield over Bol. Like, are you serious right now? And then you have Zay Todd, who hasn't done much at all in his career. Like, I'm not trying to hate, but I'm just pointing out facts. So there's like a lot of question marks with Zay Todd, and then the rest of our picks are guys names that I can't even pronounce. Like, they're drafting stashes where it's like, what are we doing? They don't play. They don't go anywhere in their NBA careers. And once again, I'm not trying to hate. I'm just trying to spread the right narrative in which this is a bad trade. And, when a Wizards player leaves the team, they always do great, especially the young ones. Like, take Kelly Oubre, for example. He's flourished, Then you have Gary Payton Jr. I go on and on, but I'm really not. I'm going to let you voice your opinion on the trade and, talk about what it means for the league in general, and especially our two teams, because, you're a Lakers fan. So,
yeah. So, this trade was kind of one that really surprised me. I honestly didn't really expect it at all. I know that the Lakers I had asked the Wizards about guys like Kuzma. But Rui Hachimura was never ever really in rumors, at least with the Lakers. We had talked about that a few podcasts ago in terms of teams that he could potentially go to, but this one definitely came as a surprise. I like it for the Lakers personally because, again, he's not necessarily great at anything, but he does do a number of things, fairly well, and it fills a position of need. Because the issue with Kendrick Nunn, he really struggled earlier this season. Last year he didn't play at all because he had an injury, and I think that might have had an impact. I don't necessarily think he's a terrible player, but I also just think like the Lakers had way too many guards, and you needed to get rid of at least one of them. We even mentioned previously, I think maybe our first podcast, the Lakers ran a 5-guard lineup. On Christmas, against the Dallas Mavericks, and they've had plenty of games where they ran, 4 guards, and Kendrick Nunn would be one of them. And that's too many small players at the same time. Some of those guys aren't much necessarily taller than you or I. So, and they're asked to, guard 6'7", 6'8" guys on a regular basis. So to me, it's kind of a no-brainer. And I understand, like, maybe you don't necessarily, if you're the Lakers, want to give up a first unprotected, for some of these other wing players. I know Cam Reddish as a second round pick had kind of been mentioned. I
Hmm.
personally like Hachimura better than Cam Reddish. Um, you
Same.
know, and on the Wizards side, I guess for Kendrick Nunn, on a team where again he's not playing alongside three or four other small guards, right? And he has like a guy like a Porzingis who I know is hurt, to back him up, or a Daniel Gafford, or obviously Kuz or Denny Avdia. Maybe he'll be better. I still don't necessarily think he'll be like a long-term piece.
Yeah.
Um, and then also, I guess it kind of shows they're really committed to Kyle Kuzma. I don't think they necessarily wanted to pay both Rui and Kuz. I mean,
Hmm.
in my opinion, like if I was running the team, I wouldn't mind doing it. But then I also guess you kind of have to look at the direction that the Wizards are going and what they want to do. Because
Yep.
there are times where I honestly can't really tell what the direction is supposed to be for that team because they have talented players on the team. So it feels like they want to contend. But at the same time, like I don't necessarily know if they're good enough to contend. So it's kind of like a weird, situation to be in. I mean, personally, I kind of agree with you where I feel like I don't like it really for the Wizards just because I just feel like again, top 10 pick in Hachimura and I don't think he's bad. Um but at the same time it also sounded like he may not have necessarily wanted to be there. Um so I don't know. It's definitely a really weird situation, but you know, for what it's worth, both players I thought had pretty solid debuts,
Yeah.
in the games that they had, you know, um Rui Hachimura, he had like, 12 points, 6 rebounds, and a steal. It was plus minus was plus 17, the highest, I think, of any of the Lakers.
Hmm.
You could see his size made an impact, helping get some extra second chance opportunities, preventing guys from just getting easy drives. And then Kendrick Nunn, against Houston, I think it was. He seemed like
Yeah.
he had a pretty solid debut as well, 12 points, even had like a really nasty dunk
Hmm.
where he just drove down the lane. And there are times he could do that, and he did that a couple of times for the Lakers this season. But I don't know. I feel like I like it more for the Lakers than the Wizards, just because it just feels like with the Wizards, it just feels like you're giving away a young player for a guy who I don't think past the season is really going to help you at all.
Nope. Um, and a couple more things to add. Like you said, the Wizards got diminishing returns on this one. You know, we got nothing of value to match Hachimura, in my opinion. There's nothing that we can do to replace that unless we build through a first round draft pick. But I don't know, man. Like low key, I feel like what the Wizards did here, what their plan was to kind of show that they're committed to Kuzma 100%.
That's what I was
And
thinking.
yeah, and I also think there's one key factor that we kind of left out was Avdia. I think they want to see what Avdia can do with maybe a bigger, bolstered up role. And I
Yeah,
think, I'm just speculating here, but I think it was probably a chemistry and rotation thing that was going on with the Wizards where, Rui probably thought he deserved to start, honestly.
yeah,
Top 10 draft pick. I I could understand his argument to be a starter, and I think that's what was going on. But yeah, once again, I think this shows the Wizards are committed to Kuzma long term, and they really want to see what Avdia can do. But I don't know. I don't think this was the right way to go about it.
mhm.
I If you're gonna take a call on Rui, I think you should get a little bit more back than none. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, because also reportedly it sounded like that some other teams that were potential finalists could have been Phoenix,
Hmm.
maybe Indiana. I guess for Phoenix, maybe you could have gotten back Jay Crowder,
Yeah.
who I guess, from a wing perspective, you probably would rather have over Kendrick Nunn. Um, but in terms of like draft compensation, I don't know how similar that would be. I don't know if the Suns would give up a first.
Right.
Maybe they would, or, because they have more first than the Lakers can give. So maybe they give up like a protected first or 2 seconds. But then you also kind of have to factor in the Wizards and Lakers. It's pretty clear that their front offices have a really good relationship.
Hmm.
They've made trades in the past, obviously the Westbrook trade.
Yeah.
Of course you can add in this trade. So, maybe this was kind of like just one of those, good business deals
Yeah.
in that regard. But yeah, this was definitely kind of a unexpected trade I think from
Yeah,
both sides.
and
I
I
guess
think
it's kind of like where the Wizards go from here. I know you mentioned like, committing to Kuz, maybe seeing if Avdia can get a bigger role, but I guess
right.
like, if you're gonna keep Bradley Beal, is this like another kind of move to help them continue to kind of build around Beal?
Well, I'll answer your question as to what I think they're trying to do with or what their plans are. Honestly, like you said, you can't tell what this team wants to do sometimes because sometimes it looks like they're tanking, and then other times it looks like they want to win.
Right.
And me being the Wizards fan, I try and watch all our games, but to me, it just looks like we're chasing the play in. You know,
Mhm.
I think we're chasing the play in, and we want to bet on ourselves and control our own destiny, whatever you want to call it,
Mhm.
and maybe get out of the play in and get into the real first round. I think that's what their goal is this season. But I don't know, man. It's just like every time we draft something, it doesn't seem like it's what we need. And
Right.
especially, really, more importantly, what Beal needs because he's the star player, he's the franchise player, he has the super max, he has all that.
Right.
We're clearly committed to him and he's clearly committed to us. But you wouldn't be able to tell by the way that they draft and
Right.
what they move.
Yeah.
But as for the trade, I think one thing we also left out, I think you touched on it lightly, was the guard saturation with the Lakers.
Yeah.
But we also have to talk about the forward saturation with the Wizards. So,
Yep.
it is a good business move for both teams technically because it resolves some issues. Forward density on the Wizards and then guard density on the Lakers. So they both gained something that they needed somewhat.
And then I guess also going back from more of a Lakers perspective, I guess, so now they've done the Hachimura trade. You got about, 2.5 weeks or so until the trade deadline. You got AD back. Um, so I kind of wonder if this maybe is somewhat of a precursor to maybe another move. I don't necessarily feel like they're going to trade Russ, but maybe you still move Pat Bev and somebody else for a pick. It kind of confused me because for a long time, or at least, based off of what had consistently been reported, if it wasn't Russ, it was going to be Pat Bev and Nunn. But now Nunn is moved, and obviously
Yep.
you wouldn't trade Hachimura since you just nabbed him. And also, more importantly, it sounds like their plan also is to extend him and keep him long term alongside LeBron and AD.
Hmm.
So I wonder, you know, are there any other moves that they might potentially make? Just because it feels kind of weird that this would be like the only real move, but at the same time, I don't know the flexibility of the moves they can make because again, you already moved None, so it's either move Pat Bev, maybe you add Lonnie Walker or something like that, or
Yeah.
just Russ. So I don't know.
I was just gonna ask you because I didn't want to put you on the spot, but you kind of brought it up. So,
Right.
like, could you actually see a deal with Lonnie Walker and Pat Bev,
So
actually happening?
yeah, so my thought process is like for me, if I know that Lonnie Walker is out of the price range in terms of not being able to keep him, then I wouldn't necessarily mind moving him if
Right.
what we're getting back is something solid. Like if it was say like, the Boyan Bogdanovich trade where it's like Pat Bev, you add Lonnie Walker as that decent young player in a pick, then maybe you do that. I mean, but at the same time, like I'd have a little concern about doing a trade like that, especially for an unprotected first, just because of the age of Boyan. I know
Yeah.
he's been having a great season, but he is 34. And it's
Very
just for
true.
me, any trade that I do if I'm the Lakers, and again, this is just from my perspective, not necessarily like,
Right.
Rob Palinka's perspective, but any trade that I would do is ideally a move where they can help me not just this season, but also like in the future. So like this type of move, this Rui Hachimura move, I think is a good example of that type of move. But
For sure.
if they all of a sudden just decided to like, grab some random player and like you only keep them for one season, I wouldn't necessarily be happy about that.
Yeah.
But we'll have to see because
Yeah.
again, you know, I mean, I think it's a good fit and I think it makes a lot of sense for the Lakers just as another forward, to kind of replenish some of the talent that you traded away. They traded away Kuzma, traded away KCP, chose to not bring back Alex Caruso. So, just to kind of bring back some young players to put around LeBron and AD and maybe also keep long term. I
Hmm.
think this is a solid one.
As for the Wizards, I have one more thing to add. I kind of forgot about this. And I'm not sure how long Monte Morris is supposed to be out, but I know he is out. So this could have been a trade to kind of bolster up the guards, our guard core, and like because our guard core consists of DeLon Wright, Monte Morris, and Jordan Goodwin. Sometimes he comes off the two-way contract with the Capital City Go-Go.
Mhm.
But I think this might have been a move to bolster up our guard core and our rotation a little bit, just to get maybe like some spark plug points from none. I don't see him starting for us.
No,
I think as of right now, with Monte Morris out, I think DeLon Wright is probably going to start just because of the defensive ability that he brings.
right,
But because in my opinion, I think none is somewhat of a defensive liability.
right.
But we'll see where it goes. And once again, sad to see Rui go. We miss you, Rui, at the Wizards fan base.
Welcome to LA.
Yeah. So have fun in LA, man. I know you're going to do great. And playing alongside Braun, he's just going to make you 10 times better. And like I said, the trend is Wizards players leave and they do great. And if you're playing with LeBron, you're going to do great. So,
All right, so moving on to the next topic. So Damian Lillard, what a game he had the other night against the Utah Jazz. He had
yep,
60. Yes, you heard that right. 60 points, um, 50 through three quarters, which
it's
is,
crazy.
just absurd. I mean, obviously Portland has kind of been, this weird team this season where I think going into the season, a lot of people were pretty down on Portland just because a lot of people felt like, the moves that they made didn't really make a lot of sense. Where's the
Mm-hmm.
defense with your backcourt? Um, and then they got off to a really hot start to the season. Um, and then all of a sudden now they've kind of just slid.
Yeah.
I believe they're about 12th in the Western Conference, around 23 and 25. But, you know, um, shout out to Damian Lillard for having a great game.
Yeah. Um, and he did it on 29 shot attempts and 10 free
Yeah,
throws, which is insane. And
exactly.
I heard that only two other players did it. So it was Carl Malone with 26 and then James Harden with 24 shots. So,
Right. Um,
and that's crazy, man. Like
yeah.
high percentage, historically efficient. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, actually, which kind of sort of leads me into this topic, sort of. It kind of, since we had talked about Portland, even though it's kind of wild to see him still do this, I mean, he's 32, on a huge contract. It just, I don't know. It still feels like Portland is kind of one of those teams that's just stuck in no man's land.
yeah,
And, I just kind of wondered, it's kind of a situation similar to the Wizards where I'm just kind of confused as to what the plan is here. I understand that the plan is, I guess, in theory, to contend with Damian Lillard on the roster, but I just don't think that this roster is good enough to contend.
yeah,
So I just kind of wonder, like, I mean, me personally, I would blow it up.
same.
I mean, I understand that Lillard loves being in Portland. Um, and that's always great. He's considering there's so many guys nowadays that don't play um for one team their entire career, but at the same time, like, I just don't think they're really going anywhere. So I mean, I don't know what you think, but for me personally, like I said, I would just blow it up, maybe send Lillard somewhere else that he may want to go to
Yeah,
and just kind of start over. Cause I think you also, again, you got an opportunity to get, a great pick here. And, maybe Portland slides enough to so that they still get a good pick. And
bless you.
and also have Lillard with him as well. But I don't know. This team just feels like it's not going anywhere, and I just don't really feel like it really makes a whole lot of sense.
Well, here's the thing. I'm gonna try and explain some business stuff with the NBA again, but the parallels are like you said, they're strikingly similar with between the Wizards and Portland. They're stuck in a rut. They can't seem to ever contend. But I think the main issue is the markets, bro, because we got to look at it like this. Washington and Portland don't attract the big
Right.
market free agents.
That's
And I
true.
think that's what's, haunting these two franchises because you can have a star and a supermax player. That's cool and all, but you got to build around that with some other, stars if you really
Right.
want to win in today's league. Back in the day, you could have done it with one person, but nowadays it's not that easy because everyone's so good and everyone's so efficient and the scoring numbers are insane. We talked about that in another podcast episode where we talked about the scoring in the league. It's at an all-time high and all-time efficiency rating. So it's like, yeah, like I said, the it's definitely the free agency. I think that's what's wrong with Portland and Washington. They can't seem to attract free agents, and
Mhm.
the draft picks can only get you but so far. You
Right.
know,
You have to draft really well because, like you said, since those teams are not teams that where star players go there, you got to do really good in the draft. And
yep,
obviously the Wizards did pretty good having Wall, having Beal with that backcourt.
yep,
Um, and then in Portland, obviously you take Lillard, you pair him with LaMarcus Aldridge. I
hmm
mean, and they had a really good squad. But and it's kind of interesting because I can understand, say Portland as a city not necessarily attracting a lot of talent, but I would almost kind of feel like DC would be an area where like a lot of players would want to play. But for whatever reason, they've never really been able to get great free agents to come there. Of course, I mean, obviously you have other cities like LA, and New
hmm
York, but it always is kind of interesting because I always just felt like DC as a city would be a place that people would want to play for.
yeah. Well, the thing with DC, being somewhat of a native, it's a city where you either love it or you hate it. There's no in between with DC. And I think that's one of the biggest issues with it is it's hard to kind of navigate the fan base, navigate the politics. There's a lot going on in DC. I think that's just what it is. It's a lot of hustle and bustle. Not nowhere near the amount of New York or LA,
Right.
but it's just different. It's its own vibe, and I think that's the problem is that it doesn't necessarily mesh with some
Right.
players, but
Yeah. And same
we'll
with
see. Hopefully, they can switch it around and make it more appealing, but
yeah.
who
And
knows?
yeah, and the same goes for Portland where,
Yep.
it's another city where again you just for whatever reason, like, you just don't get people to go there, So
Yeah.
I do kind of wonder, like I said, what Portland's plans are, to continue to contend. Obviously, like I said, with the trade deadline coming up, maybe they're a team that potentially, makes some moves. Maybe they
hmm
move a guy like, a Yusuf Nurkic, or, maybe they try to get an upgrade, at one of those wing spots. But,
Yeah.
it is kind of fascinating because again, I think Lillard is really good. And I just feel like it's cool to see him in Portland and play like that, similar to Beal. But I just wish he was on another team.
Same. And just for the record, this was Dame's fourth time doing that.
Exactly.
Fourth time scoring 60 points. And this was his most efficient time.
Yeah,
So
I
shout
just
out
want
to
to
him,
see.
man.
Yeah, I just want to see what he looks like. On a team that has a legitimate chance at contending, because I think he can, you know, be on a team, that can help win a title. I just don't necessarily know if you can build around him to do it,
Yeah.
especially at this
That's the
point.
issue.
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially at this point, considering he's 32. He's a little bit more injury prone. But I've always liked Damian Lillard, and hey, we both had him, on our All Star reserve list.
Yep.
And he's been still having a great season, even at this
Yeah.
point in his career.
He's great.
Yeah. So to close out, we got a couple of rumors. So the first one, according to the Athletic, so reportedly Bob Myers, or the GM, who's built the dynasty in Golden State, he could potentially be gone
hmm
after this season. It's it's really been a weird season for them, considering that they win the title last year. There was a lot of excitement and hype going into the team this season because of all the young guys. You thought they, would all get better and, become big rotational pieces, but it just hasn't worked. Every time you want to feel good about them and feel like maybe they get it together. I know they won last night,
hmm
against the Grizzlies in a funny situation where, Steph throws his mouthpiece because Jordan Poole takes a bad shot to close the game, and then
hmm
ironically Jordan Poole wins the game for them on a layup. But it's just been really bizarre to see what they've been doing this season. I mean, they are like eighth in the Western Conference. They've kind of bounced around 500 the whole year, and you do kind of wonder, future wise, what's going to happen with them because as we just talked about, it sounds like Bob Myers could potentially leave. I feel like it may be a money thing where he wants to get paid, and we'll see what the owner Joe Lacob does. But I do kind of wonder for the future of this team what's going to happen. Because if I'm not saying he's gone, but if he goes, I mean, it could potentially, really alter, the course of this team.
Yeah. And I think with Bob Myers, like, we got to also look at it like this. He has a career too. So, and he's the GM for the Warriors, right?
Yeah.
So he could look to move on and go to a vacant spot, or somebody else hire him,
Yeah,
and that would help his legacy, because at the end of the day he's probably thinking about himself too.
right.
So these guys
Yeah,
got to watch their backs too. Like I keep going back to the NBA business thing. I'm sorry to make that a narrative, but it
no,
is what it is. Like,
yeah. The
Myers is,
NBA is the business.
yeah, at the end of the day he's going to look out for himself, and we could see him try and rebuild a franchise or something,
Yeah.
solidify his legacy.
Yeah, other teams that were mentioned, I believe, for example, the Knicks were mentioned. That would kind of be an interesting scenario if he were to
Yeah.
go to the Knicks, and kind of build, another great team there. But, yeah, it does kind of feel like if he does leave, it could be, maybe for legacy purposes. I went to Golden State and built, a dynasty and built up a dynasty, and now I might go somewhere else and build up something else. But
Yeah.
I don't know. It just feels kind of I would be kind of surprised if he were to leave just because I just feel like he's had a lot of success with that team
Yeah.
and they can still have success. Like I said, I know they've had a really tough season, but I don't think they're, done. I mean, as long as Steph is still Steph, they will always have a shot to contend. So it
Yeah.
just feels kind of bizarre. And I do wonder, like, would he leave? And if he does, where would he go?
Yeah. And like you said, he's in a great spot because he built that team, and they've won so many championships. It's insane. But,
Hmm.
we'll see where it goes. Personally, I don't necessarily see him leaving, but
Right.
like I
I
said, I
agree.
understand if he does, and I would understand the reason why.
Yeah.
Um, and I would really understand the reason why if he goes to, a poverty franchise currently, like, maybe New York or Charlotte or something. I don't know.
Right. And then for our last rumor, the Nets looks like they may potentially look to add some more depth pieces and swap some out. Names mentioned Seth Curry, Joe Harris, according to the Ringer. Um, this is kind of interesting. Brooklyn has been pretty good this season. Obviously, they had that really wretched start to the season and, had a lot of drama going on, but they've, since turned it around. They've kind
Hmm.
of bounced up and down since Katie's got hurt, but you can kind of tell that there is something there, but it does feel like they need a little bit more assistance. Ben Simmons, you know, it's kind of been a really weird season for him where, he started off the season playing really poorly, then
Yeah.
had a little stretch where he looked, pretty close to his old self. And
Hmm.
now he's kind of gone back to, playing really tentative, not looking for a shot, not even really closing games.
Yeah.
The last couple of games I saw, I mean, he didn't close. Um, but I do wonder, like, we talked about last week, um, rumors potentially involving like a John Collins, somebody like that. It would make sense to definitely add some pieces because, again, I think Brooklyn with Durant, with Kyrie, this is a team that should be in contention for the title.
Yeah.
So why not look to improve if you can? And those guys are on expiring contracts. And, it's kind of like what we said about the Lakers, in regards to Rui being around long term. See if you can get some guys that can help you beyond this season.
Yeah. And I think, you mentioned two 3-point shooters, which is interesting, in Joe Harris and Seth Curry. But, they're really valuable names, in my opinion. So, if they're to move them, they're going to get something back, whether it be a pick. But I don't think they're looking for a pick. I think they're looking for something to help them right now
Right.
on the date that they're traded or whatever.
Exactly.
Like you said, I think John Collins is a great fit because
Yeah.
he would help bolster them up a lot, give them some scoring, something. But we'll see
Exactly.
where it goes.
Yeah. All
I'm
right.
very curious. I think this deadline is going to be really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And we actually have some plans for the trade deadline. So we're planning on potentially doing a live stream of the trade deadline, which should be February 9th. The trade deadline ends around 3. So
Hmm.
we'll be trying to do a live stream, reacting to trades, talking about potential trades.
Yeah.
And you guys should join us. It's gonna be really fun, I think.
Yeah, we're gonna have a great time. We're gonna be there, majority of the day. So make
Yeah.
sure to tune into that.
All right. Well, that's it for today's episode of Off Ball Takes. Again, we really appreciate the support that you guys give us every episode. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for listening. Have a good weekend, and we'll see you on Monday.
Yep.